Ooh, okay. Here we are. That sounded perfectly like every other episode, didn't it?
Yeah.
They'll never even know.
We don't tell them the secrets.
A magician doesn't reveal his or her secrets.
The bullshitting that we've got going on here.
This is a lo-fi podcast. I believe we've made that clear throughout the entirety of our 31 episode run thus far.
Dude.
Dude. That reminded me of, like, the Workaholics guys. What's that one guy's name?
I don't know.
You've never watched that?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Workaholics? You've never heard of Workaholics?
Is that with Andy Samberg?
No! It's not with Andy Samberg. That's Lonely Island or SNL or
Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which I always want to fucking call Reno 911 for some fucking reason.
I like Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine is amazing, but Workaholics is really good too. You should check it out.
I like that Brooklyn Nine-Nine was saved by the outrage of its fans.
Right, because that's just like...
People were so fucking pissed.
Because it's so good, and like the cast is just like really... It's like a very strong ensemble cast.
Yes.
You know, like, what's his name? Like, Brewer or whatever, who plays the captain. And you always gotta do that while we're recording.
Nobody can hear it.
You can... do you listen back to the episodes?
Nobody can hear it.
Because you can clearly hear it.
Nobody can hear it.
Yeah, you just keep telling yourself that. Joe Latrulio, you know, Chelsea Peretti. I don't remember all their names, but like, what's the really big guy? What's his name? He's like really good.
I don't know. Isn't this what IMDb is for?
This is what IMDb is for. And
Alexa.
No, don't do that because people are listening on their devices.
That would be dope. Oh my god, I'm so sorry.
I think it's like designed not
what
to.
What if she like stopped the podcast and was like,
right?
Yes,
oh,
Masturbator 404.
Right. Oh my god, that's funny.
I think I made your Siri call you Luigi because I thought it was funny.
I never use Siri, like ever.
I know, but I think it'll say Luigi.
That's good. That's good, because I never use it.
Wait, why is that funny?
Why was what funny?
Why is Luigi funny? Because I'm trying to, like, make an intro so we can introduce ourselves. I'm trying to make a segue.
Right. Yeah, because I realized about 30 seconds ago, like, we still hadn't introduced ourselves.
Like, I made Siri call you Luigi.
Because I'm actually named... Mario.
Princess Peach.
Oh my god. My name's Toad. It's so crazy. Yeah, my dad named me after himself. Mario.
It's fucking stupid.
You know.
My dad named his son after himself, though, too.
Oh, really? Nick?
Yeah, but... No, not Nick. Lawrence.
Oh, right.
But he's not a junior. He's the second.
Oh, he's the second.
Yeah.
So fancy. Yeah. Oh my god. Oh, that's like Steph. Stephen Curry. Technically, his name is Wardell Stephen Curry II. I'm pretty sure it's the second. Because his dad was Wardell Stephen Curry. But he went by Dell. And then his son is Wardell Stephen Curry, but he goes by Steph. And of course, people would always be like, oh, Stephen Curry. Or, what was so fucking annoying, they would be like, oh, Stefan Curry. Like, his name's not fucking Stefan just because he's black. Like,
Wait,
do your fucking research.
Is Stefan like a quote-unquote black name?
Yeah. You don't think so?
No.
Okay, I'm pretty sure it is.
Stefan?
Yeah. But it wouldn't be spelled Stephen. It would be spelled with an O. That's what also didn't make any sense. We're really starting the pod off like on a tangent this time. Stefan.
I'm going to make a Twitter poll about that.
Good.
We'll get the results.
Do it with the MMT Twitter, though, not your personal one.
Well, then you have to...
I thought you were going to make a new one.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so, little story before we get started. I attempted to make us a Twitter, and I did. I had it made. And then I was like, oh, I'll put our birth date in.
You definitely told this story.
What, on the pod?
Yeah, keep going, though.
Oh my god, I'm like such fucking grandpa. So anyway, I like decided to put our birthday on there. So we started in like whatever, December 2017. So I was like, oh, we're like 6 months old. And I just thought, oh, that'd be kind of funny. And then it like gave it this little pop-up window. It was like, oh, do you really want to do this? Because like it might fuck up your shit. And I was like, oh yeah, like what are you talking about? Yeah, of course. And then it was like, your account is locked. You are not at least 13 years old. You must send us a fucking picture of your ID, which I've just been too lazy to do.
Which is not worth it.
I had also never
Wait
sent
a minute. That means we have to make, like, another name.
Well, that's what I thought you were going to do. Well, it was at Mystery Murdery thingy, so maybe we can think of a better one this time.
Was it all lowercase?
I think so.
Does that matter?
I don't think so. I'm not a Twitterer. You know this about me.
I know, I've never made more than one Twitter account.
Well, you've never been, a podcaster before. I guess. Or some shit. I don't know. I was trying to think of a good comeback.
So, you're Mario.
Oh,
I'm Chloe.
Yeah, I'm Mario and you're Chloe.
You're listening to Mystery Murdery Thingy.
You're listening to Mystery Murdery Thingy.
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 Thingy. That was awful.
It's the podcast where we bullshit and then
we talk about mysteries.
Oh, we talk about mysteries and murderies
and thingies.
And thingy. Yours is a thingy this time, kind of, right?
No.
You said it's a straight up mystery.
Yeah.
What does that mean to be a straight up mystery?
In my opinion, a straight up mystery is anything ancient and anything that's a legend.
Oh, okay. A legend with a basis in reality.
Yes.
Because we always have to do something
We always try to do something pretty real.
That's real, exactly.
Yeah. Like, I wanted to do some stuff, but I, found them debunked. Like, Atlantis, debunked.
Right. Skinwalker Ranch was, just real enough. Because there's so many eyewitness accounts.
Yeah, that's what I liked about it.
Yeah. Where it really truly is a mystery.
And there were, debates if the government was, in on it or not.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Man, the government, man.
We need to talk about more government mysteries.
That's true. Well, I kind of want to get back to the story that I did for our quote-unquote episode 0, which...
Pat Tillman.
Right, Pat Tillman. Which, if you were lucky enough to get the email at the very beginning, which is how we started all this, sending an email to 20 of our friends. Yeah, you'll have heard that story, but I kind of want to do it again, and that's definitely a government mystery. But there's lots of them out there.
Yeah.
Throughout the world. Yeah. Governments keeping shit away from us.
Anyway.
So I think you should probably go first this time.
Okay. Okay. So.
Okay.
Take your glasses off, because I don't like it when you read
that's
my
right.
computer screen. That's
Chloe
gonna be a thing now.
Chloe would prefer me to be illiterate.
No, I just don't want you reading the story before I say it.
That's fair. That's fair.
We could just sit here in silence and you read it and we just record your reactions. How about?
Hello, silence, my old friend.
I just burped. I'm sorry.
I've come to talk with you again.
Wow. What parody is that? I don't get it.
It's a Simon and Garfunkel song.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Read a book. Listen to a folk song, Chloe.
Wow, rude.
You're being rude.
If I said any classic rap song, you'd be like, oh well.
What? What have I ever made that sound in my life?
All the time.
Just do your story.
Okay. So I got this.
Man, Mario and Chloe were bickering like an old married couple. Oh my god, it was so awkward.
All in good fun.
So
I got this story from Reddit.
Of course.
I love Reddit. And it's about something called the Persian Mummy. So I don't know if you've ever heard of this, Mario.
I have not.
Okay, good. It's got a good frickin' twist.
Okay, cool.
So basically, it all starts with a man trying to sell something he shouldn't on the international art black market. After a tip-off, the Pakistan police, this takes place in Pakistan, the Pakistan police officers raided a house in Karachi, Pakistan. A video was recovered, and it's basically a recording of some guy. His name is Ali Akbar, with a mummy that he's discovered that he's dug up, and he's basically trying to sell it.
Okay.
And I think it's got a price. It has a lot of price tags on it that it's been like appraised for, but in the video he says it's like 20 million or something like that.
Right. Can't really put a price on a human body.
But it still is worth millions of dollars.
Oh, sure.
He claimed that it was discovered when an earthquake disturbed an archaeological site in Quetta, which is near the Afghani and Iranian border. It's like it's like a mountainy, like desert place.
It's like a dessert place. There's like TCBY, there's like Emac and Bolio's, and then there's like Quetta,
TCBY?
Yeah.
That's like frozen yogurt, right?
It's a dessert place.
Froyo's so gross.
What? I love TCBY.
What does that mean again?
I forget.
It like stands for something.
The country's best yogurt.
Oh yeah.
I think it's like from Texas. I think that's why I like it.
There's some around. I've seen some from where I live. I've seen some TCBY.
Oh yeah. Some TCBYs.
There's one in LaGrange, downtown LaGrange, I think.
Oh, okay, cool.
Or I might be thinking of Red Mango. Have you ever heard of Red Mango?
No.
I only like frozen yogurt if it's fruity.
Fruity frozen yogurt.
Yeah, like I can't have like chocolate or like cookie and cream like Froyo.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, we're moving on.
Moving on.
So yeah, Quetta. That's where it was claimed to be found. So the owner of the house that was raided was a tribal leader named Wali Muhammad Riki. So basically what happened, the police seized the mummy. They called it a national treasure, and this was a big deal. This was the first time that a Persian mummy had ever been found. According to historians, the Persians didn't mummify their dead.
Okay.
So it was given to the Archaeology Museum in Karachi. I don't remember how
Karachi.
Karachi. I don't remember how to say it. I watched a documentary, so I should know how to say all this, but we'll see if I remember.
I'll correct you because I did all that research
because
for the
I
Benazir
do
Bhutto
a lot of
episode.
reading.
Well, I just happened to have done that research for the Benazir Bhutto episodes.
No, I know.
I heard a lot of Pakistani names.
So yeah. So when they found this, they're like, "Wow, this is a big moment. It's a very proud moment for the archaeologists and the really prominent ones in Pakistan." They called it the discovery of the century. And I'm going to talk about Dr. Asma Ibrahim. And I watched the documentary from like BBC History. It was called Horizon, BBC Horizon documentary. That's what it was called.
Cool.
On the mystery of the Persian mummy. And she was one of like the main people that they interviewed and they talked to. So she's the curator of the museum at the time, and she's an archaeologist, and she's the one who conducted most of the studies. So here's what we have. The mummified body was in an ornately carved wooden box. In that wooden box was a stone coffin. It was about 4 feet. It was about 4 feet 7 inches tall. It was covered in fabric that had later hardened, which was to protect it. It had a golden chest plate on the top, right where the arms are crossed, inscripted with this same mysterious script that was on the wooden box and the stone coffin. It also had a golden plated face with a crown of cypress trees, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So no one had ever seen a mummy in Pakistan before, so this was a big deal. But the weird thing about it was, how did it end up in Pakistan? How did the ritual signs of mummification that were unique to only ancient Egyptians, how did it end up in Pakistan? When did it go from Egypt to Iran to Pakistan? So they also noticed that the internal organs were removed. all moisture was extracted, which, according to science, takes 40 days. It was wrapped in linen cloth, encased in wood, and placed in a sarcophagus, just like the ancient Egyptians do.
Yeah, I was going to say, the removal of the internal organs and all
Yes.
that, like, complete desiccation is, like, very typical of Egyptian mummification. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, here's the odd part. Although there were lots of parts similar to the ancient Egyptian mummies, there's also some odd differences. So there were adornments on there that had never been seen on Egyptian mummies. The script carved into the gold plate and the wooden box was cuneiform from ancient Iran. And like I said, Iranians didn't use mummies. So is it a Persian mummified in an Egyptian way? Did Egyptians send embalmers to Persia for this? And so after they're looking at the body, they're trying to look at the identity. So our main girl, Asma Ibrahim, looked at the cuneiform inscriptions and translated it. The inscription claimed that this was the unknown daughter of Persian king Xerxes. Rodugana. That's how you say it. Her name is Rodugana. And the inscription translated said, "I am the daughter of the great king Xerxes. Moderica, protect me. I am Rodugana." So Xerxes ruled over a huge empire about 2,500 years ago, from the Mediterranean in the west, India in the east, and then Egypt in the south. So the daughter, Rodugana, lived in a city called Persepolis, which is currently in southern Iran. And Persepolis is where the king held all of his, like, celebrations and, like, functions and stuff like that. So it was pretty important.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of that before.
Mm-hmm. No remains of anyone from the Persian family had ever been found before. No one knew much about Rodugana. No one knew how she died, how old she was when she died. And there was some evidence that this was still from ancient Persia, despite there were some similarities. The carvings on the sarcophagus matched ancient stone carvings that were seen in the city of Persepolis. So this is where we get into the ancient art form and why it's a big identifier in this. So ancient Persian art is very specific, and they have very classic symbols that are seen on everything. So rosettes are a classic symbol of Persian art. Those were found on the outside. There were 7 cypress trees on the outside of the coffin and 7 cypress trees on the crown of the mummy. And these trees are the symbol of the city of Hamadan, where the king used to have social functions and celebrations. Nope, I messed up. Rodugana lived in Persepolis. We're going back. But the city of Hamadan is where all the social functions, celebrations happened, and that is significant because the 7 cypress trees are like a symbol of Hamadan.
Okay.
So it was on the coffins. They're like,
So all of these things are strongly linking it to the Persian culture, there at the time. So not, as opposed to it having been, like, moved from ancient Egypt to this area, right?
Yes.
It seems to be endemic to the ancient Persian culture.
Thank you.
If I could just interject my professorial verbiage for just a moment.
Your synopsis.
That
was
my
a very good synopsis.
Yes.
Why don't you read the rest of the story?
Just trying to help.
Okay. The guard Ahura Mazda, who is the chief deity of I always forget how to say it. I have it like written out phonetically. Rodugana. So the guard Ahura Mazda, chief deity of Rodugana's Zoroastrian religion. Zoroastrian religion. That was also found carved on the box. But still, this wasn't necessarily proof that the Persians mummified their dead. Like, one of the questions was, where's the rest of the royal family?
Right.
So, Asma Ibrahim, she did more digging, and found a book by an ancient Greek historian, Herodotus, where he describes in detail how the Persians kept the tomb of the royal family. So he said that they preserved the bodies with cloth and resin and placed them in a sarcophagus similar to the Egyptians. He went to the tomb or something. So it's possible maybe that Radugana's tomb had been raided, and that is what happened to all the other ones too. So eventually the mummy was taken to the hospital and x-rayed. The x-rays showed that the person was older than 21 to 25 years of age. So this was a mature adult, besides the fact that it was 4'7". And they talked about some growth on the pelvic bone, and how this part is here from ages 16 to 21, but it's not there in ages 21 to 25. And so it also went through a CT scan. The scan showed no internal organs, which was typical of ritual Egyptian mummification. And also, I didn't know this. I learned this fun fact. Because the hands were crossed over the chest, that signified royalty.
Oh.
So if everything about this is true, then that means the ancient Egyptians must have supplied stonemasons and morticians to the people of Xerxes, and also that ancient Persian royals were mummified just like Egyptians. But there were more problems as they continued to dig. So they went to a specialist of Egyptian mummification named Bob Breyer. And so here is where a lot of the craziness comes out. So let's start with some important details I'll explain. So Breyer explains how smart and precise the Egyptians were when it came to embalming. They were professionals. And I think that's also what's so intriguing about them. So extracting the brain, that was one of the hardest things to do. It was one of the hardest parts. So what they did was they put this needle, and he in the documentary, he had all the tools splayed out on the table.
God.
Yeah, it was so, oh God, it was gruesome.
This is the worst dentist I've ever been to.
Right. So they have it, he held up this needle looking thing. It honestly looked like a crochet stick, but pointy, sharp.
Right.
So they stick that straight up through the nose to open the nasal cavity. Then he took out this wire looking thing, and they stick that up through this now open cavity, and start twisting it around so the brain liquefies and then drips through your nose like fucking snot.
It's very smart.
Isn't that nasty?
Oh, also very nasty, yes.
Yum.
That's, yeah.
Yeah.
That's just, yeah.
Yeah.
No, Dad.
You know who's also, yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, what does he say? He's
Don't start the joke if you can't finish it.
Who played Snape in Harry Potter? And he recently died. Alan.
Alan. Fuck. I don't remember. Okay, moving on. Oh my God.
Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Okay, sorry. I just wanted to say that. Okay. So, brain falling through your nose like snot. What a great time.
Yeah, I always love it when I have my brain falling through my nose like snot. It's great.
It's great, right?
It's awesome.
So, here's the important part. To do this, they had to break through bone, specifically the ethmoid bone that leads to the cranial cavity. So they did lots of CAT scans. And he showed CAT scans of a regular Egyptian mummy. In this CAT scan, the ethmoid bone in the nose was missing, which is typical. But in the CAT scan of the Persian mummy, the ethmoid bone was still there. So that means the brain was taken a different way. And as they can tell through the CAT scans, that the brain was taken instead through the chin, which is non-surgical and a lot more brutal.
Mm-hmm.
And the internal organs were removed after the brain, and in ancient Egyptian practices, and it's something that must be done quickly because bacteria is released and it decays faster. So what they did in ancient Egyptian times, a small, maybe like 3-inch incision to take out the organs. But in the Persian mummy, the incision was in the wrong place. And it also had a larger incision, which was like 8 inches.
Oh.
So the biggest problem was the fact that the heart was missing. That was the biggest indicator, because the ancient Egyptians believed that you thought with your heart, that it was a sign of your intelligence, and that the soul was connected to it. So the heart was always kept inside the body, so the spirit can like return back. That was like their whole thing for like burying,
interesting,
preserving bodies, because they believed that the soul would come back and like you'd have this glorious afterlife. So that's why they would like keep the heart in, and they'd put all your belongings with you and stuff like that.
Right.
And like if the pharaoh was dead, like the servants and shit were killed too. So like, yeah. So we come to the conclusion that this wasn't done by ancient Egyptians. So who done it? The cuneiform was studied closer, and missing letters were found, and there were also inconsistencies. Furthermore, Radugana is the name Radugana. It's the late Greek translation of the name Wardigwana, which is the original Persian name of Xerxes' daughter. So there's no way that the Persian king would have the name of his daughter described in a Greek form that wasn't translated until years later.
Right. Okay, so it's anachronistic.
Yes, it must have been made after the Greeks had conquered Persia, which was long after Radugana had died.
Oh, okay.
So our main girl, Asma Ibrahim, did more research, and she looked at the inscription closer under a magnifying glass. Pencil marks were found.
Oh, okay.
So, like I said, we know a lot about Persian art from monuments and from stone murals, and the rosettes, which is a symbol. What their hypothesis is that it was traced from a monument. And lead pencils were only invented 200 years ago. And this was actually the princess. It would have been 2,500 years ago.
Right.
So after carbon dating, it was found that the reed mat the mummy had been laying on had been made in the past 50 years.
Oh, in the past 50 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're getting pretty modern, actually.
Yeah, it's crazy. It gets crazier. So let's talk about Oscar White Muscarella. We're saying Muscarella. Oscar White Muscarella. So he's an American archaeologist who had been studying at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Really smart dude. He was contacted. He was given 4 photos of the mummy by an Iranian middleman named Amanullah Righi, he was all like, here's like some photos. I got this mummy. It's got ancient Persian inscriptions on it. Like, are you interested? You should take a look at this. So he did. And so Oscar Muscarella was not only an expert on antique art and archaeology in ancient Persia, but he was also an expert at spotting fakes and forgeries. And he said that he had seen something like this before and immediately noticed in the photograph details in the artwork that were wrong. He said that Iran was the place where most forgeries came from. It was very, very common. That's where a lot of forgeries on the black market start. They begin in Iran. And he had studied many forgeries from Iran. And so he looked at this and had no doubt. He was like, this has come from Iran. So now we know it's a fake. Surprise, it's a fake.
That's the twist.
There's more.
Okay.
So
keep twisting.
Of course, poor Asma Ibrahim was very disappointed.
Sure.
To find that this was just a modern forgery. But
she had been duped at least for a time.
Yes. But that doesn't change the fact that there was a body inside.
Oh, it's a real body.
It's a real body.
Right.
So when radiologists looked back at the CT scan in detail, they noticed that ligaments in the inner ear, all very, very, very tiny, were still intact, which would not have been the case if it was a mummified ancient body. So, that being said, this woman must have died recently and then been mummified.
Right.
So, someone with knowledge of ancient Egyptian mummification practices had taken a newly dead body, removed the organs, covered it in chemicals, left it for a month to dry out, wrapped it, put it in a box, all for profit.
Oh my God.
So it had to have been done within 24 hours of this woman's death, meaning that it was calculated and it was thought out. They had to have some kind of lab or facility to do it in, to take the body to, and to perform the operation of extracting the organs.
Right.
They had to use tons of chemicals are needed to dry out the body. You need resin, you need bandages, you need medical tools, and all of this had to be stored somehow. So they come to the conclusion that this could not have been done alone. A goldsmith was needed to beat out the chest plate, a cabinet maker to carve the wooden box, a stonemason to inscribe on the stone coffin, someone who had extensive knowledge of cuneiform text and Persian art and Persian customs. So this was extremely premeditated and calculated. They had to find a body, they had to get all this information, and then get connections to sell it on an international black market. So who the fuck are these people? Who is this woman? Where did she come from? So that's the mystery. So what they needed was an autopsy. This is where Professor Chris Milroy, who is a forensic pathologist, comes into the story.
Forensic pathologists are, like, the coolest fucking people. Like, I don't know, I just feel like that's, like, the coolest job.
Yeah.
You get to just, like, okay, now you solve the murder. Like, look at that body and just, like, okay, tell us what happened.
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
So he did.
Sorry, I had to give my 2 cents.
He did the autopsy, and or to do the autopsy, they had to open it. They had to cut through the material. And what I liked that they talked about in the documentary, that at this point, Asma Ibrahim was like, I don't care, I want justice for this person. So, like, because, like, some archaeologists were like, oh my gosh, like, don't you want to preserve that and this and the other thing? But like, she was like the curator of the museum that, like, owned it. And she was like, no, like, we need justice. Like, I want to know what's going on here.
Right.
So they cut through the outer material, and in the documentary they show this, like, cool footage of them with those, like, saws that you used to cut off, like, casts and shit.
Oh.
It was like, bzzz, and they're, like, cutting straight. Oh my God, it was crazy.
Oh.
A tuft of blonde hair was seen, and so once they got this autopsy, they noticed that the spine was out of alignment. Her back was broken, which had come from a blow to the lower spine, and it was a blunt injury instead of a sharp one. So that begs the question, was this murder? Limbs and fingers were bound separately, as the Egyptians had done. And then after the bandages were removed, they could see that the hair was gray with blonde tips, but darker at the roots, so they think that it was possibly bleached. And here's the weird part. They packed her body with drying chemicals, with sodium bicarbonate and sodium chloride, frickin' table salt. So samples of bone and tissue were taken and sent to the lab for testing, for carbon dating, and it showed that this woman had died in 1996.
Wow.
4 years ago.
Oh my God.
Yeah, 4 years before the mummy was discovered.
Oh, it's just, like, chilling.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
Yeah.
So another scan without the bandages was done of just the plain body, and it was found that her neck was broken, which was the possible cause of death. So it could have been the cause of death, they said, or a cause of like damage
Right.
done by, like, discovering it and stuff. So she could have been murdered, or someone just dug up, like, a recently deceased body and mummified it. We don't know. So there was an investigation and this whole aftermath. So Asma Ibrahim published her report on April 17th, 2001. In it, she stated that the Persian princess was, in fact, a woman about 21 to 25 years of age who had died around 1996, possibly killed with a blunt instrument to the lower back / pelvic region, example, hit by a vehicle from behind. Her teeth had been removed after death, and her hip joint, pelvis, and backbone damaged before the body had been filled with powder. Police began to investigate a possible murder and arrested a number of suspects in Balochistan, Pakistan.
Baluchistan.
So the body ended up being given proper Muslim burial rites, and it was buried in 2008. Since then, 2 other Persian mummies have been found on the black market, offered for $6 million. They seem to have been mummified the same way.
Oh my God.
So the mystery lies in this. Who is the victim? Who made the mummy? Was the victim killed specifically for the mummy, or was it a convenient corpse from some type of random accident?
Convenient Corpse sounds like a death metal band, but like a shitty one.
The Convenient Corpse.
Yeah. Yeah, we're Convenient Corpse.
And they spell convenient wrong on purpose. Like, they spell it with K.
Right.
They spell corpse with K.
Right.
Like corn.
Yeah. Fuck Korn. That band sucks.
I never really listened to Korn.
That's because they suck.
Korn was more of a band that my older brother would listen to.
Right. That
Anyway.
makes sense.
Yeah. Or like a convenient corpse from some kind of random accident. And are there more victims out there? There's some kind of weird mummy factory going on. What kind of bullshit? Is this human trafficking? Like, what the fuck? Who thinks of this shit? Is it like some kind of gang, or oh my, it's so bizarre. But yeah, that's the mystery.
Cool. Quite bizarre.
So my sources are the BBC Horizon documentary, The Mystery of the Persian Mummy, episode 7 of the 2001 series. Info on the Wikipedia page, Persian Princess, and then traffickingculture.org article by Neil Brody.
Cool.
Yay.
That was a good twist. Like,
right?
I wasn't expecting that. For it to, like, you know, I thought, oh, maybe it's like a hoax from like the 19th century or something, but like, oh no, it's a person who was murdered in 1996. Like, oh my God. Okay. So, yes. So yours did end up being a little bit murdery. Possibly murdery. Mine is most definitely murdery. Yeah, I'm doing the Chicago Tylenol Murders.
Okay, I don't know much about this one, despite the fact that it's a hometown.
Right, this is essentially a hometown for us, because we're, you know, here, like, exurb of Chicago, and of course Chloe is from Chicagoland itself. So this took place in Chicagoland back in September of 1982, specifically on the morning of...
Sorry.
Yeah, okay. Sounds like there's a rat back there. So on the morning of the 29th of September, 1982, in Elk Grove Village...
Oh, I was looking at places there.
Yeah, just, you know, a couple hours north of here. 12-year-old Mary Kellerman was having a cold. She woke up feeling pretty bad that morning. And she was given Tylenol by her parents, because they wanted to make her feel better, of course, right? Unfortunately, it didn't make her feel better. In fact, she immediately collapsed onto the floor and started going into spasms. The medics actually thought that she was, like, having a seizure.
That's so scary.
Yeah, and she died shortly after. Later that morning, Adam Janis, 27, was at home sick in Arlington Heights from his work as a postal worker. He took Tylenol and immediately fell into a coma.
I didn't know it was fast acting like that.
Immediate. That afternoon, in Winfield, Mary Reiner, 27, bought Tylenol at a Frank's Finer Foods. She was dealing with some, you know, residual aches after she had had her 4th child. And she...
God bless that woman.
Right. Also fell into a coma.
Man.
So, yeah, this is like all bang, 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 bang. Like, I just want to give you a sense of, like, how fucking crazy this day was, right? The 29th of September, 1982.
Wow.
In Chicagoland. Okay, next, at the Illinois Bell Phone Center, Mary McFarland, 31, took some Tylenol, you know, sort of midday to help her deal with the headache. Because apparently it was just, like, a fucking crazy day at the Illinois Bell Phone Center that day.
Yeah.
She immediately fell to the floor in the middle of her office, dead. At 5 p.m. that day, the family of Adam Janis, the second victim, were grieving at his house, right? Like, his whole family was there basically, like, having a wake. And, of course, they have no idea why, you know, Adam was dead at that point. So, his little brother, Stanley, and his sister-in-law, Teresa, took Tylenol to deal with headaches that they had, brought on basically by the crying and the grieving for Adam. I know, it's, like, really sad. Stanley then collapsed to the living room floor. While he was being taken out by the EMTs, Teresa also collapsed. So those were, like, bang, bang. And at about 9 p.m., Paula Prince, 35, flight attendant from Chicago, bought Tylenol from the Old Town Walgreens, just, like a block away from her apartment on LaSalle Street. And she went home, took the Tylenol, and immediately collapsed dead. Her body was actually not found until 2 days later. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 victims from the morning
one day
to 9 p.m. on one day, the 29th of September in Chicagoland. So, like, yeah, this is fucking crazy. And at first, authorities thought that there must be, like, some kind of, like, toxic gas attack, or maybe, like, just a deadly disease that was just, like, spreading, especially with those 3 members of the same family all dying on the same day, right?
Yeah.
Like, there must be something linking those. But they didn't yet see the linkage between all 7. And, of course, at that point, the last victim's body hadn't even been found. But there were 2 firefighter friends who happened to actually solve the mystery that night. So, Richard Keyworth from Elk Grove Village and Philip Capitelli from Arlington Heights, there just happened to be 2 friends, happened to be 2 firefighters, were just, like, chatting on the phone about, like, this crazy day, right?
Yeah.
Because they had both been part of the groups that were responding to some of these incidents. And Capitelli's mother-in-law actually worked with Mary Kellerman, the first victim's mom. So he had a personal connection to the murders, to the first victim. And Keyworth happened to actually have the incident report for Mary Kellerman's death, because he lives or works in Elk Grove Village. And he started reading it out to Capitelli, and Capitelli says, like, oh, well, that's weird, because there were 3 deaths from the same family, the Janus family, that happened where I work. And what's actually weird is that the word Tylenol, like the mention of them using Tylenol, was in all of these reports. So Keyworth eventually says, okay, this is a wild stab, but maybe it's the Tylenol.
Yeah.
It's kind of just the logical conclusion, right? So they immediately start calling, like, all the different police and, investigators that they know, and start investigating this, right? But what they didn't know was that at the Northwest Community Hospital, where the Janus family was being treated, they already suspected that the family had been poisoned.
Okay.
And when investigators opened the capsules of the Tylenol from that bottle from the Janus family, they immediately knew that it was cyanide. They smelled the almond smell.
Yeah, because you can smell it, right?
Right. They saw that it was sort of grayish to brownish. That it was...
Facts, people.
Right.
Know what it looks like.
Exactly. That it was large granules. Whereas Tylenol, acetaminophen, which is the active ingredient, right, is a white, fine powder.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of like the distinction that they immediately knew, like, okay, this is potassium cyanide. So, obviously, like, the federal police, the state cops, the local police, they all, like, descend upon Chicagoland. Like, okay, we need to, like, fucking get this figured out, because, like, people are dying from Tylenol. Like, oh my god, can you imagine?
In these
like,
random-ass places.
Yeah, exactly. So they set up
it's not
what they
like
called...
one place or anything.
Right. It's like the whole Chicagoland area.
Yeah.
So they set up what they called the Tylenol Task Force in Des Plaines. But they also had a separate headquarters at the Chicago PD, which may have led to some disorganization in that initial investigation, into the 7 murders. But Tyrone Fanner, the Illinois Attorney General, sort of became the face of the investigation. And what you should also know about Tyrone Fanner is that he was both up for re-election at that time and also badly losing to his opponent. So there were some accusations by some, people, some of the investigators, that instead of really running like a good investigation, he was just trying to get in front of the camera, basically. And that his sort of ego and politicization of this may have, like, hampered the investigation. And what also didn't help was the tensions between the federal police and the local police, right? This always happens, right? It's like a joke in movies, right?
Oh, yeah, like, the FBI and,
right, the FBI shows up and is like, who's running this scene? It's like, well, not anymore.
Yeah.
Now I'm in
sir. This is my jurisdiction. No, I started the case. This is my town.
Right.
Classic Criminal Minds.
Actually, we have supremacy because we're from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You better just step aside.
My boss called.
We got it from here. So that sort of shit was going on.
I'm calling the office.
And, because of these, like, rivalries, not only between the feds and the locals, but also, like, amongst the locals, like, everyone wants to be the one to crack the case, right?
So do you think that shit is why it wasn't...
It didn't help. Like, who's to say, like, we'll never really know. But it definitely did not help.
This is definitely one of the things on my list besides knowing who killed John Benet Ramsey is I want to know who did this.
It is one of those, like, great murder mysteries, for sure. Which is, like, truly unsolved. So the police, if they weren't working smart, right, if they weren't working in a coordinated fashion, they were working, like, really hard, right? Like, obviously, like, they all want to find the killer. That's part of, like, the problem.
Tragic.
Yeah. So what they had to do first, though, was remove all the fucking Tylenol capsules from the shelves in Chicagoland.
Yeah.
Like, immediately.
Yeah.
Like, fucking yesterday.
Yeah.
And just so you understand...
Did anybody else die after those 7?
We'll talk about that.
Okay.
But just so you understand, like, this is the capsules. So we don't really see these anymore for the most part, partly because of this incident. But these are the ones where it's like the powder on the inside.
And it's weird plastic.
It's like a weird plastic that dissolves in your stomach pill that you can kind of take apart.
Yeah, those are weird.
So just so you kind of understand what's going on here. So the mayor of Chicago at the time, Jane Byrne, officially ordered that all of the capsules be removed from the shelves on the night that Paula Prince's body was found, which again was 2 days after, so the 31st or 32nd. So Byrne's order, not to mention the fact that like 7 fucking people had died in this crazy fucking incident, caused a literal worldwide panic about the Tylenol.
Hell yeah!
All over the country, all over the world, people are like freaking the fuck out.
Meanwhile, Advil CEO Advil wait, what? The CEOs at Advil are flipping a shit.
Well, usually there's only one CEO. And actually, I think they were probably celebrating. They were like, oh, okay, people aren't going to buy Tylenol. Well, I guess they're going to buy us,
Ibuprofen!
Right. But the Chicago PD, what they also did was drove around with loudspeakers, like literally warning people, like, don't take Tylenol. So
yeah, because phone beeps weren't a thing.
Right,
like international text messages.
There was none of that because it was fucking 1982.
How do you think the it spread then? The news, how fast it did? Because you know how nowadays news spread within hours. Like if a celebrity dies, you'll know a couple hours later. I wonder how fast. I wonder how it would be if this happened in modern times. Like, how fast would that shit go viral?
Honestly, I don't think that it would matter. This could have been in 1582 or 2018 or, like, 1983.
Really?
Like, the 7 people dying and a common, like, something that people ingest being possibly poison, that's gonna get around. Like, word of mouth will spread it. Also, they had the news, they had the radio, they had the police literally going around telling people. Like, no, like, there was no more saturation of information that could have been possible at that point. So I understand what you're saying, but, like, I kind of think that, it got
big,
around.
It's big no matter what.
This was the biggest news in the world at the time, let alone, like, in Chicago. So Johnson & Johnson, right, the makers of Tylenol, had to respond to this, right? Like, they had at first they were a little hesitant, like, about doing a full recall, but, like, the uproar, right, like we were just talking about, like, the number of people talking about this and, like, up in arms about it, forced them to do a full recall of all of the Tylenol capsules.
Oh my god.
Which I think I remember reading cost them, like, over $100 million. And they also offered a $100,000 reward for finding the killer, which of course was never, claimed because they never did. And it actually became known as one of the best responses to a tragedy of any company in history. Like, this is like the textbook example of how to respond to a tragedy like this. Because what they also did, part of that, remarkable response, was that they started putting tamper-evident packaging, kind of that triple seal packaging, on every single medication.
I did read about that, too, and how it made a big difference in how you package medication and how things are, set up.
Exactly, and it led to even more reforms, throughout the FDA, more regulations. This is essentially why we have the kind of, sealing and hermetic sealing and kind of packaging that we have in the modern day.
Yes.
This incident is why all of that exists, essentially. So, because of their, really good response, also, miraculously, the market share for Tylenol rebounded within a year. It went from, around 30% down to 8%, back up to around 30% within a year. And within a few years, they actually became by far the leading medicine of their type in the market.
Yeah, Tylenol is really popular. Tylenol is default pain pill,
when you think of a pain pill, you think of Tylenol.
Yeah.
The same way when you think of, whatever medical adhesive strip, you think of a Band-Aid. It's the byword, right?
So it's Kleenex, right?
Kleenex, exactly. So, while Johnson & Johnson was kind of succeeding at their response to this incident, the police were abjectly failing. They were fucking floundering. They found zero physical evidence ever to link anyone to the crime.
How could you?
Exactly. I mean, it is hard, right? They don't know exactly when the perpetrator presumably took the bottles, filled them with cyanide, and put them back on the shelves. They didn't find any, fingerprints on anything like that. They didn't... Nothing. Absolutely no forensic evidence to go on. And they, like I said before, worked really hard at this, right? They weren't slacking. They talked to and investigated all the people connected to the stores where the Tylenol was bought, the place where it was manufactured, the people who cleaned all these places, the distributors, fucking everyone connected at all to any of this was thoroughly investigated, including the families of all of the victims. And they found nothing. It led nowhere.
That is so bizarre. Does that mean it was an inside thing?
I don't think that indicates anything. It's a void of information.
Yeah.
I mean, they got to the point where they were listening to psychics and people calling up with just cranks, because they were just looking for any possible lead. They also, again, because this is 1982, right? They didn't have many security cameras. There was no electronic payment system to track the purchases. So they just really didn't have much to work with. And they didn't even know if it had been purchased. The killer might have just stolen the medication and then brought it back later.
Oh, yeah.
So what they did try was publicizing the memorials and the graves of the victims to see if the killer would, show up. And they monitored all those locations for months and months and months. And again, it led nowhere, because there's the old cliche, right? The killer's going to return to the scene of the crime. In a sense, that would be the scene of the crime. So police did, though, eventually get a break when a man named James William Lewis sent a letter to Johnson & Johnson demanding $1 million, or the Tylenol murders would continue. So they thought, okay, I guess we've found our murderer, right? At first. So let's just get into who this guy is for a second, because this guy Lewis is a truly bizarre person.
Ooh, I'm excited.
So yeah, exactly. So you should be. So he had actually been evading authorities for several years, by actually changing aliases several times, along with his wife.
That's sketch. Oh, and his wife?
And his wife. So first, they escaped from, in a sense, Kansas City, after Lewis was credibly accused of killing an elderly friend and then dismembering the friend, putting him in a bag, and then hoisting him up into the attic of the friend's house.
What the fuck?
Where he wasn't found for weeks and weeks later. And Lewis did a lot of weird things in this incident. He put a note on the friend's door saying that he was, like, away and not to worry or something. He, like, weirdly showed up and tried to, like, explain away the guy's absence. Like, it was very strange. Like, it seems like he killed this guy. No one knows why. Because they were friends. It was, like, this, like, elderly guy who was, like, their neighbor. But because the police didn't get proper, paperwork, they didn't read him his Miranda rights, he was let off. He got off on a technicality, essentially. The judge said, the police cannot prove their case because the evidence that they found was not obtained properly. So, West and his wife, or Lewis, rather, and his wife, I think he changed his name. Oh, no, West was the guy who got killed, sorry. Lewis and his wife then changed identities and moved to Chicago in 1981.
Okay.
Okay. So, his wife worked as a bookkeeper while he apparently studied, like, history and economics and philosophy and had sort of highbrow conversations, reportedly, with his neighbors, who said that he was, like, really, really smart. Kind of like a genius, but a weird genius, right?
That makes sense.
He wore, like, shabby suits.
I feel like that fits the profile.
Yeah. And he also would apparently just, like, wait around for his wife a lot, like, waiting for her at the bus stop, bringing her lunch at work, just kind of hanging out. So
a little dependent?
A little dependent. So eventually Lewis did find a job, and again, Lewis is his last name. But he got fired from that job because of his explosive temper, which is another hallmark of his personality throughout his life. Eventually, he became obsessed with his wife's former employer, a man named Frederick Miller McCahey, after McCahey refused to pay his employees, including Lewis's wife, the back wages that he owed them. Essentially, he wrote them all out bad checks. Lewis led the charge to get the money back, to recover the money from McCahey, and actually ended up assaulting McCahey during a hearing. So, after this incident, Lewis and his wife felt like, okay, I guess it's time to move on again. For whatever reason, they felt like they needed to change their identities again, and they actually moved to New York City on September 3rd, 1982. Now, you'll recall the murders occurred on September 29th, 1982. So there's 26 days that separate Lewis and his wife's leaving Chicago and the Chicago Tylenol murders beginning. So, Lewis has a pretty good alibi, right?
Yeah.
Essentially, he was in New York at the time, not in Chicago. So how could he have done this? Pretty good alibi. And what he claims about the letter is that he sent the letter to Johnson & Johnson pretending to be the killer as part of sort of an elaborate scheme to expose McCahey's wrongdoing. So essentially what he did was He's
still hooked up on this
he was
other
still
guy?
very, to the end of his days, he's going to be obsessed with, like, this guy McCahey and some other people. Like, this is a guy who holds a fucking grudge. And what he did was the bank account that he had told Johnson & Johnson to deposit the $1 million into was actually the closed account that McCahey was supposed to pay his wife and the other employees out of. So what he figured was, okay, I'll point the feds in the direction of this closed account, and that will lead them to seeing how corrupt McCahey was, and he'll get some kind of punishment. It doesn't really make sense, right? And Lewis also may not have been totally mentally competent. He was forcibly committed at a certain point in his life.
Oh.
So it's not totally clear, like, whether he's entirely mentally there at all times. We just don't really know. Or at least I don't. And he was never charged with the murders themselves. But he was sentenced to 10 years in prison for the extortion, right? Which he kind of clearly did. While in prison for that sentence, Lewis offered to help the authorities actually try to find the Tylenol Murders killer.
How could he help?
Right. Seems kind of weird as well, right? It's like, okay. And the authorities, they were like, oh yeah, definitely help us. Because essentially what they thought was, oh, maybe he did do it, and that's why he's asking help. Because that's kind of like a thing that serial killers do sometimes, or killers. They'll try to, like, assist the police in, like, solving the murder. It's some kind of, like, weird thing in their head where they, you know, it's kind of like the arsonist firefighter, right? It's like you cause the incident and that so that you can solve the incident so that you can be the hero. I think that they may have thought he was kind of in that psychological space. But they thought he would kind of, like, unintentionally confess or, like, slip up kind of, but he never did. He also never agreed...
Well, he's really, really smart, you said.
Exactly. He also never agreed to a polygraph test. What he did do, though, was he did show the authorities a very plausible way in which one could commit the crime. Essentially, by taking a wooden board, drilling holes in it, the same, you know, size, gauge, you might say, as the capsules... and then placing the capsules into the board, using a knife to separate the capsule, and then putting cyanide in the capsule and then resealing it. Since, again, it's those, you know, kind of plastic ones that you can kind of take apart and then I guess could carefully, like, reassemble. So the fact that he did that, and it's very sketchy. It does not look good for Mr. Lewis, right? Obviously. But the prosecutor, you know, with whom he was working, did explicitly say that it should not be viewed as a confession. So, I guess we'll have to, again, leave that where it is, as a mystery. But Lewis did get out in 1995, and actually ran, for a long time after that, a small tax business with his wife in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And just kind of, like, lived out his days there.
Do you think he did it?
No.
I don't think he did it either.
No,
I think he's really, really smart, though.
But also, like, delusional and, like, just, like, very kind of, I don't know, detached from reality in certain ways. So there was another suspect, kind of the other one I'm going to talk about, named Roger Arnold, who was, like, kind of erroneously accused of the murders by a bartender who, like, overheard him saying something but kind of misunderstood it. So
bartenders know all.
Right. So he was cleared pretty immediately. But he did become, like, super enraged and kind of had, like, a nervous breakdown after this incident, and actually attempted to kill that bartender who accused him.
Oh, what?
But he didn't kill him. He actually killed a different guy named John Stanisha instead, who he mistook for that bartender in the summer of 1983.
Dude, every time I hear shit like that, people getting mistakenly killed for somebody else.
Right.
That is so...
I know.
Tragic. That is so messed up.
Very. And Arnold did serve 15 years for that murder. So the investigation has actually continued, like, up until today, essentially. Just kind of intermittently, like, there was a big flare-up on the 25th anniversary. Mostly the investigation is still focusing on Lewis. He's really the main suspect that authorities are still looking at. I think so. I actually don't remember. But nothing has ever been proven against him. And this is when you were asking earlier if there were any other deaths linked to this. There were a number of copycat murders, even after the new packaging was introduced. So in 1986, there were some similar incidents that happened in Yonkers, New York. And then in Washington State, later that year, there was actually some tampering that was done with Excedrin, where a woman named Susan Snow and a man named Bruce Nickel died also from cyanide poisoning. And Nickel's wife, Stella, was actually convicted of the killings. And then there was also a hoax tampering in Chicago and Detroit in 1986 as well that led to a big panic. But obviously no one else actually died in that incident because it was just a hoax. So yeah, that's the story of the Chicago Tylenol Murders. And like you said, it's one of those just like great unsolved mysteries. So my sources, Joy Bergman at the Chicago Reader, That was kind of my main source. It was like a long form article, really getting into, the whole incident, especially into Lewis and kind of his story as well. So if you're intrigued by Mr. Lewis, I would definitely encourage you to seek out that article. Of course, Wikipedia, the Chicago Tylenol Murders page, an article by Adam Hintertower or something, I'm not sure how to say his name, at Wired, Dan Fletcher at Time, Jonathan Saltzman at the Boston Globe, and then a story by the AP called Tylenol Figure is Convicted. Oh, and I did also watch some news coverage from the time, especially in relation to that one in 1986 in Yonkers. So there's actually some good, news footage out there about these as well, if you want to look that up. So yeah, that was my story. Thanks for listening, you guys. We're super appreciative. We are on Patreon, of course. Patreon.com/mystery murdery thingy, where we will be posting more weird news extras. When we get to doing that, we will do it. But for now, I think we've got some weird shit in the news. Weird shit in the news. Weird shit in the news. In the news. Weird.
I'm gonna go first because I have it open.
Okay, go.
So this is fucked. I know I told you a couple of the weird shit in the news. It's not one of any of those.
Okay.
So, this happened in... Stop reading!
I wasn't doing it.
Yeah, you did! I know you did.
I didn't see anything. It was just like an instinct. Okay, just go. Stop telling me not to read and tell your fucking story.
Okay, so the title is Dead Man Found at Adelaide House with a Fruitcake on His Head.
Oh my god.
So this was in Australia. And this article is by Rebecca Opie, at the Australian version of ABC News.
It's actually the Australian Broadcasting Company. It's a completely different company. Oh. It just happens to be called ABC as well.
Never mind.
That's okay.
Thank you. So a man who was allegedly beaten to death by two friends was found in a pool of blood on his kitchen floor with a fruitcake on his head, a Supreme Court jury had been told. So Leslie Kevin Talbot and Eldon Waycroft, these stupid fuckers, went to court. David Saunders was found lying on his back in his kitchen floor in a pool of blood. Prosecutor Jim Pierce said that Mr. Saunders sustained at least 6 blows to the head, as well as 2 knife stab wounds to his neck.
Oh my god.
So this was crazy.
Jesus.
The court also heard that, bizarrely, Mr. Saunders was found with a fruitcake on his head. One or the other of the people who killed him placed a fruitcake on his head before they left him for dead on his kitchen floor.
Jesus.
Yeah.
You think that's funny, do you?
I just don't...
Putting a fruitcake on your dead friend's head, you think that's funny? It's not funny. That's what I have to say to those people.
Oh my god.
That's
people are crazy.
That's fucked up. Okay, mine's a little more lighthearted.
Good.
My weird shit in the news. It's from an article by Damian Sharkov in Newsweek, and the headline is, "Did the sun go out over Siberia? Russians want answers for devilry in broad daylight."
This was scary.
This is a fucking freaky story, y'all.
If you live in Russia and you have heard of any of this, please email us and please tell us what the fuck is going on.
Please. So this was in the Yakutia region, which is in northern Siberia. So this is like the northern part of Russia. And it happened over kind of 3 different small cities, small towns, simultaneously. And there were a lot of reports. Like, a number of people saw this and reported it to authorities. And what it was a complete darkening of the sky at just about noon, to the point where the sun essentially turned off, according to people who saw it. it looked as if there were like a what's the word an eclipse, or as if maybe a big like eruption
like
or wildfire had gone over the sun, put ash over the sun. So the problems with both of those. Okay, first, in terms of the eclipse, when there's an eclipse, there's a measurable drop in temperature. There was none when this happened. Second, in regards to the wildfire theory or hypothesis, first of all, you would be able to see a ton of ash in the air, which people did not report seeing. And, there would also be like a strong smell, a scent in the air, which also was not reported. So neither of those is really like that credible of an explanation. Now, the authorities don't really have a good explanation, so we're kind of left a bit with the mystery here. But something definitely happened, because like a ton of people saw it, and we're just like, we really don't know. So who fucking knows? Is that the Yeti? Does the Yeti know? Do you know, Mr. Yeti?
No, it's just scary.
Oh yeah, no, it is kind of scary. Yeah, I think we're probably done, right?
Yeah.
Was this a good episode?
I think so.
I feel like it was kind of loose.
Well,
I guess that's good. Okay, so
it's definitely fascinating.
It is, it was some interesting shit. But yeah, again, thanks y'all for listening. We really appreciate it.
Tell your friends.
Tell all your friends.
We're on Patreon.
Tell them to yell out Mystery Murdery thingy in the middle of, a crowded bus, or, if they want to get up on, I'm just like bringing up an old episode to have the outro here. But yeah, we really appreciate it, y'all.